Hi, my name is Tom Shoebridge, and welcome back to So You Want to Be a Screenwriter. We're going to show a series of clips, and guess what's common to all of them? A screenplay.
There must be a con like me in every prison in America. I'm the guy who can get it for you. Cigarettes, a bag of reefer, if that's your thing, a bottle of brandy to celebrate your kid's high school graduation, damn near anything within reason. Yes, sir, I'm a regular Sears and Roebuck. So when Andrew Dufresne came to me in 1949 and asked me to smuggle Rita Hayworth into the prison for him, I told him, no problem.
Captain, how soon can you land?
I can't tell.
You can tell me I'm a doctor.
No, I mean, I'm just not sure.
Or can't you take a guess?
Well, not for another 2 hours.
You can't take a guess for another 2 hours?
No, I mean, we can't land for another 2 hours. Fog has closed down everything this side of the mountains. We've got to get through to Chicago.
For your consideration, the Jericho.
I'll be throwing one of these in with every purchase of 500 million or more. It's a piece.
Oh, now we've come to the really exciting part, the screenplay, which everybody seems to want to start with, but as I've explained, there are a series of steps before you get to fade in. There's no magic about screenplays. They're stories, and they're dictated by the medium. The medium is in control of the story. The medium is in control of the screenplay. So here's a screenplay from one of my students. It won an Oscar. It's 101 pages long, and it made millions of dollars for everybody involved. It looks like this. A little bit of writing, lots of white space, and screenwriters who read screenplays for a living look to see how much white space there is, and that tells us whether or not it's someone who understands the craft of a screenplay. The medium suggests that it has to be built on images. These are moving pictures, and so guess what? The screenwriter has to create images in the screenplay. And the magic between those screenplays is very much like poetry, in which metaphors and similes are strong because of the electricity between the images and or away from the images. And that's exactly how screenplays work, because that's how the medium works. Editing works by having the right image follow the previous image, followed by the next best image, in order to create a particular impression, emotion, thought, mood, tension, whatever they're trying to create. It goes from image to image to image. Sometimes the images are longer, and sometimes they're very short. So screenplays are made up of just single shots that stand alone, a face, a gun, a car, quick cuts, and or they can be scenes where there are multiple camera angles and a duration that is dictated by the length of the scene. And scenes vary in length, and when we talk about them, you'll learn, and I mostly will say this dictum again, that they are as long as they have to be. And so that's what you are thinking about when you're writing. The thought that goes into the first image is very important, because this is what the screen looks like at the beginning. And your job is to fill it with color, action, and which has meaning and some kind of involvement for the viewer. I suggest that there's only one kind of story. And you can read, there are all kinds of people who have written PhDs, theses, and even books on what is a story, how many stories are there. Some people say that there's 7 kinds of stories. Other people say there are 15. Many people say there's only one story, the hero story, and so on. My thought is that there is only one kind of story. It's an engaging story. It's an involving story. It's a story that draws the reader into another universe, into a world that they didn't know about until that first image came on the screen. So that first image in your screenplay is all important. You then are going to be dictated by the famous 3-act structure, which you will hear again and again and again. And it's not because it's a formula, it's because the medium dictates it. Drama is built on expectation, rise and fall of tension and imagination and newness and freshness. And so the 3-act structure really lends itself to that. And it's not a Hollywood invention. It was invented by 3 famous dramatists 500 years before Christ, Sophocles, Aeschylus, and Euripides. And they had 3-act structures so that the audience would be carried up, and then to a point, and then up, and to a point, and then up, and to a conclusion. The expectation of screenplays means that when you get going, you are involving the viewer to get to a particular point. And then, and if you want to find out this is true, just watch 10 well-known features. And you will find that at the 10-minute mark, approximately, there will be something that happens that determines the beginning of the direction of the film. Notice, the beginning of the direction of the film. It's now has a name, inciting incident, and that leads us to the end of the first act. The end of the first act determines the rest of the film because the major character has made a decision. Notice, has made a decision, may have been forced on them, may have come from their character, but it's they that makes that particular decision. And when they do, then we are thrown into another film. One of the things that I've discovered is that feature films are made up of 3 separate films: first act, second act, third act. And you could even say 4, because as we'll find out, in the second act, which is about 60 minutes long in a feature film. All of these numbers, by the way, change according to the length of the final product. So we'll use the 100-minute feature film as kind of the model. So 20 minutes for the first act with an inciting incident at minute 10, and then the second act 60 minutes long. When I am paid to fix somebody's screenplay because it's not working, it makes it easy because I simply go to the second act, because that's where most people fail. Because they have to create a 60-minute drama, and so what they haven't done is to make a specific plan for it. They haven't measured out what the audience expects. And notice expectation is what is so important, and that's driven by plot, and it's driven by character. And so when we create those expectations, they allow the story to meet certain points in a direction that keeps the audience involved and keeps the audience fascinated and expecting. And they don't know what to expect, but they're expecting something. If they figure it out too soon, if it's a surprise, then you know that you're doing your job. I have a screenwriter friend who has on the front of his computer the big word surprise, because that's what he's continuing trying to do to his audience. So in this second act becomes all of the complexities of the drama. This is where the multiple plots are developed, where they cross over, and when they get to the midpoint of the second act, we have then a major event which again changes the direction of the film. And it's called the midpoint, sometimes called the reversal, but it too is dictated by the fact that 1 hour of sustained, evolving action or tension or intent gets not tiresome, it could be boring, whatever, but what it demands is that something fresh comes in and complicates the world even more. As you will learn when we talk more about the events and elements of a story, that complexity and obstacles are so important. And that's what happens in Act 2, is the obstacles have to become tougher and fresh and totally unexpected, surprise. And that will lead us towards the end of the second act. And the second act end is basically the introduction of the major crisis of this character, of the major character's life. If you think life was tough for them in Act 1 and then tougher in Act 2, it really gets tough for them in Act 3. And it has to be tough in the sense that if the audience figures out how this is going to end, then they get bored and they walk away. They turn off their screen. So your job in the third act is always to keep things tense and evolving and complicated and difficult for the hero or major character until the very last moment something creative happens and we then know what the end of the story is. And you wrap it up really quickly, because if it was in a theater, people would all be ready to be standing up. They won't be waiting for the credits. They will be moving on. So the screenplay is built on those elements, that there are constructions of scenes, long and short, sequences, which are a series of scenes that are tied together with a common kind of action, very often like a bank robbery sequence where they come up to the bank, they go into the bank, they rob the bank, and then they run away from the bank. That's a sequence, okay? And then followed by a series of scenes and so on. The thing about the screenplay is that the story, as I mentioned before, must move all the time. And that when we take apart scenes, which I'll talk about later on, you'll see that there are elements that keep the story moving. And as you're constructing your screenplay, you really have to see it as a series of moving pictures which are going in a particular direction, which is fascinating for the audience. If you don't do that, you won't have much of a screenplay. So in the next talk, I'll take the screenplay apart even further so that you can see that there are specific elements which make a exciting, interesting, and marketable screenplay.